We have next on the agenda is something we're going to be doing probably through most of the year. Is that correct? We're going to try and be bringing residents back in to kind of recap some of the history of Carroll Stream. This is our 50th year, and this is our first night that we're actually going to start our series, and it's Historical Recollection Series kicked off by Mrs. Norma Blum. The first Carroll Stream resident will share her memories of the early days, and I asked Rick Geezer is kind of heading this up for us. So, Rick, it's all yours.
Yes. Carroll Stream, as we just heard, was the vision of our founder and architect, Jay Stream, who came up with the concept for Carroll Stream Estates. People began to move into the village in 1958. We are honored and privileged tonight to have a member of that first family who moved in on November 1st, 1958, Miss Norma Jean Blum, and she's joining us right here. Chris, could you get a microphone and we could ask her a couple questions?
Okay, where she's at.
On November 1st, 1958, before the village was incorporated, you and your family moved into Carroll Stream. What made you decide to move into Carroll Stream? And once you got here, how shocked were you that you were the only person here?
Well, there was a lot of land, which nobody was on. And I think it was my father-in-law who said that these houses were the best built houses. So we decided we would want to live here. And we bought a house, and it was our first house, so we were very excited about it. We had a baby that was a year old, our first son, and it was my husband liked a lot of open land, and this was at that time it was a lot of open land. Boy, but it sure has changed.
Well, we should mention that it was what is now 141 Mohawk in the old section of town near the corner of Mohawk and Blackhawk. And just for historical, so people know, at that time you moved in, Mohawk was not known as Mohawk, it was Palmer Drive.
I didn't even remember that.
Blackhawk was known as Gables, and Thunderbird was known as Dickens. And prior to incorporation, it was a West Chicago mailing address. You had the rural roots.
Yeah.
But you moved in 1958, and if anyone else has a question, feel free. When you moved in, any interesting things? There were farms all around you. Anything?
Yeah, there were cows like practically in our backyard. You know, the farmer had all these cows, and it was kind of interesting. When the kids got a little bit older, they liked it. And my husband volunteered for the police department, and he was a volunteer. And I don't remember a whole lot about it because it was so long ago.
Right. Well, you did mention that there was a volunteer police department. There was also a volunteer fire department as well in the community. And as the community was growing, people all had to pitch in so things got done in the community. Am I correct?
Right. Yeah, you had to volunteer for a lot of things.
Right. Well, I've got right here, if the camera could zoom in, there's some pictures right here of some of the early building. This would be what is now Mohawk, looking towards Blackhawk. And the houses that you see are the model houses right there.
Is that house still standing?
Those houses are still standing. The house right here is the dentist office.
Oh.
It was the longtime public library.
And Village Hall.
And the Village Hall originally, the original Village Hall.
Uh-huh.
So,
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just a question. Isn't it interesting? We just heard Ms. Bloom discuss volunteering, you know, the more things change, and how those themes run current today. What type of shopping or commerce was in the area, Ms. Bloom?
Well,
Any?
as I remember, there was a small store at Tedron's, and it was down by Trail
It's Army Trail and Gary.
Army Trail, yeah.
Right.
And that's where we did our shopping. It was just a small, really small store.
So it must have been a bit of a relief when they finally built the grocery store right across the street, the
Right,
IGA.
yeah, that was nice, yeah. Then we had a little bit more, better shopping.
Right.
Norma, where'd you move here from? Where were you originally from?
Well, I grew up in West Chicago, but then my husband, yeah, we had apartments, in West Chicago. And then we decided we wanted a house, so that's when this was our first house then.
Went to wide open spaces at that time, huh?
Yes, my husband loved that.
Well, it's interesting that on December 27th, 1958, Carol Stream, the 47 residents agreed to sign a petition for incorporation. On January 5th today, of 1959, it was officially canvassed, and Carol Stream became a community. Do you remember that day at all? Do you remember, were you happy that you were now a real town and not just a rural
I think
outpost?
so, yeah. I can remember, I think, Baylog, he was the president or something.
Was the first
and
village
he lived
president.
next door to us was Chuck and Anita Schmidt, and we're still friends today. We keep in touch and everything.
And you mentioned to me they still live at their house.
Yes, they still live there. And they're about the only people that I know that still live around here. I don't think there's too many that are still here from 50 years ago. They've retired and probably moved. Some people are still here, though.
Does anyone have any other questions?
Did you raise your children in Carol Stream?
Yes.
So how long did you live in Carol Stream and in that house?
We lived 30, let's see. We moved in 1990 because my husband retired. So we lived here about 32 years, I think it was.
Amazing.
So the kids were grown. Our oldest son was married, and the younger son never did marry. So I'm living with him now. But
Well, we have, in commemoration of your visit today, we have a picture of an early family moving into a house that we'd like to present you.
thank you.
And it was one of the pictures, I just tore it apart. It is this picture right here of the family moving into the house. It is a house of Mohawk. We were discussing, and we're not sure this is actually your house. Since
It is a family.
It'll do, right?
It'll do, considering that at that time, as you said, you bought the house for about $15,000. It would have been a
Yeah.
little more if you had the garage. This house, these were the big shooters. They have a garage. So,
We couldn't afford the garage then. We just afforded the house.
well, I'd like to present this to you, and we do have a couple things with the mayor. I would also like to mention, just an interesting side note, one of our former mayor's daughters later lived in your house.
Yes,
the Mayor Ross Ferraro's daughter lived
Right.
in that house for
Yeah.
a short while.
Yes. Yeah.
Right, can you pick that up without it disintegrating? That's the petition. Oh my God, how many signatures on it?